The Iron Throne is mine, by right.
Stannis is a warrior, severe and puritanical. His main concern seems to be justice, that somehow the world should be just and that the consequences of justice would be that he would be king.
Stannis is the rightful king and the Lord of Light.
Stannis is planning to attack King's Landing, basically all guns blazing.
We'll deliver our armies to their doorstep and take the city.
I put out a proclamation to the entire realm saying that if you're not for me, you're against me.
Joffrey, Renly, Robb Stark, they're all thieves. They'll bend the knee or I'll destroy them.
Renly doesn't go along with this and has a huge army.
Look across those fields, brother. Can you see all those banners?
He doesn't approve of his brother Renly's claim.
Stannis' idea of being a monarch is you have enemies and subjects and no friends. And Renly doesn't see it like that.
Stannis is our king. We follow where he leads.
Davos is Stannis' most trusted advisor.
There's no man in the Seven Kingdoms more honourable than Stannis Baratheon, or more worthy of loyalty.
Davos is his consigliere. He's one of his most trusted confidants, alongside Melisandre.
You should kneel before your brother. He's the Lord's chosen.
Melisandre is in the business of prophesying the future.
Is he my king? She sees that Stannis will be king.
Stannis Baratheon. Your sword awaits you.
Melisandre comes from some distant land, and she brings with her a new religion.
The night is dark and full of terrors.
And a conviction that Stannis is the Messiah.
She thinks Stannis, he's a special man.
She's a foreigner, preaching a foreign religion.
Stannis is most definitely falling under her spell, which Davos does not think is good for his attempt to take the Iron Throne.
They won't be able to resist us now. Soon I shall be sitting on the Iron Throne.
Nothing is worth what this will cost you, not even the Iron Throne.
I'll not hear another word.
Stannis will perhaps do anything to get the throne. My brother Robert Baratheon had raised the banners of Storm's End, our ancestral castle, against the mad King Aerys. Jon Arryn of the Vale and Eddard Stark of the North stood with him, and Hoster Tully of the Riverlands would join. But their lands were far from ours, and separated by the combined strength of the West, the Reach, and King's Landing itself. Even Robert's own lords were against him. It was the hardest choice I've ever made. My brother or my king. Blood or honor. Aerys ruled by right of all the laws in Westeros. Everyone knew the price of defiance, but there are deeper, older laws. The younger brother bows before the elder. I followed Robert. Early in the war, Mace Tyrell's indecisive victory at Ashford cut Robert off from Storm's End. Instead of pursuing Robert and risking his record, Mace Tyrell turned east and laid siege to our home. His vast army and navy encircled us and prevented any resupply by land or sea. If a wagon tried to reach us, it was burnt. If a ship tried to land, it was sunk. We were locked in Storm's End to starve, but Robert commanded me to hold the castle no matter the cost. He could ill afford to lose his ancient seat, which had never fallen. While Robert smashed Rhaegar on the Trident, my men ate the dogs, because the horses had already been devoured. While the Lannisters sacked King's Landing, we ate the rats. If the smuggler Davos had not slipped through the Tyrell blockade with his onions, we'd have eaten our own dead. But I held the castle until Lord Eddard remembered us and marched to lift the siege. The Tyrells didn't even put up a fight. And Robert threw a feast to celebrate Lord Eddard's victory. I was sent to the Royal Island stronghold of Dragonstone to deal with Viserys and Daenerys, the last surviving Targaryen children. Before I arrived, however, they escaped across the narrow sea. Robert was furious. He stripped me of Storm's End and gave it to that prancing fool Renly, my younger brother. I could keep Dragonstone. Now Robert is dead, and a bastard pretender soils my throne while the realm fills with schemers and traitors. But the rightful king is coming for them all, and I will not stop until I have scoured this land clean of abomination. The Baratheons say, ours is the fury. I will show them. Fury burns. Melisandre's returned.
I didn't know she'd been gone.
Came back with a bastard boy.
She's going to kill him.
Why should I spare the son of some tavern slut Robert bedded one drunken night?
Because he has your blood in his veins.
I think Stannis really has come to rely on Davos precisely because Davos is the only one who's ever answered him honestly, you know, and who doesn't have his own agenda. So even though Stannis really depends on Melisandre for so much of his power at this point, Stannis is a smart man, and he recognizes that Melisandre has her own agenda. She's trying to, you know, she's serving this Lord of Light. She's a religious fanatic, and as much as Stannis has come to believe some of the things that Melisandre says, he's just not a fanatic. That's not who he is.
I don't think he's willing to take the leap from Melisandre has real power, even of a magical sort. Don't think he's willing to take the leap from that into, therefore, everything she says about her God being the only true God and all men must serve him unquestioningly. Like there's a logic gap in there that I think he's unwilling to jump.
I never asked for this, no more than I asked to be king. We do not choose our destiny, but we must do our duty, no? Great or small, we must do our duty.
He places a great deal of value in the words of this one man who's never failed to tell him the truth. You know, even when it's cost him his freedom, even when it risks his life, Davos is always willing to tell Stannis what he really believes.
But you came to me now before this boy is put to the knife because you knew I'd counseled restraint. You came to hear me say it because you believe it yourself.
Though Robert had risked all our lives to win it, the Iron Throne bored him. He cared little for justice, and less for rule. If it weren't women or wineskin, he had no use for it. Without the stalwart Jon Arryn as Hand of the King, the challenge to Robert's crown would have come much earlier than it did. The Iron Islands have never lacked for treachery. They respect only strength, and honor is as foreign to them as the Seven. After 6 years, their ruler, Lord Balon Greyjoy, wagered that King Robert had not won the support of the great houses of Westeros, many of whom still named him usurper. Lord Balon declared the Iron Islands independent and sent his Iron Fleet to Lannisport. Lord Tywin Lannister was careless, and the Ironborn caught and burnt his ships at anchor. Lord Balon and his reavers controlled the Sunset Sea. Robert then ordered me to succeed where his father-in-law, Lord Tywin, had failed. Beneath Robert's fury, I sensed relief. War he could understand. He would smash Lord Balon as he had Rhaegar. I raised Robert's fleet and sailed around Westeros to the Iron Islands. I set a trap for the Iron Fleet off Fair Isle. As sailors and warriors, the Ironborn are unparalleled. But they're not soldiers. They have no discipline, no strategy, no unity. In a battle, each man fights only for his own glory, and their longships are built for lightning strikes and shore raids. When the captains rushed in, I smashed their longships with our larger war galleys. The strength of the Ironborn is in their ships. With the Iron Fleet broken, I had assured Robert's victory. He could now transport troops and siege weapons to invade the Iron Islands. And contrary to Balon's hopes, Robert had plenty of both. I've never seen such allegiance as Robert could inspire in war. Enemies who tried to kill him one day would be drinking with him the next under their own fallen banners. In rebelling against the Iron Throne, Lord Balon did more than Robert ever could to cement his rule. When Robert came to the Iron Islands, he brought with him the full power of Westeros. Sir Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard led the assault on Old Wick, while I subdued Great Wick, the largest of the Iron Islands. But Robert saved the seat of House Greyjoy, Pike, for himself and Lord Eddard. Robert would later boast of the battle's bloodiness and how he could have torn down the island into the waves if Lord Balon hadn't bent the knee. But if I'd have led the assault, Balon's neck would have bent, under his sword. Because I do not forget, I do not pardon. His time will come. All their times will come.
What's a man of the Night's Watch doing in a wildling camp?
My name is Jon Snow, Your Grace. I'm Ned Stark's son.
This is a world where bloodlines mean everything, and particularly for Stannis, I mean, whose whole claim on the throne is based on the fact that he is the rightful heir. He is the true blood relation to Robert Baratheon, his older brother, and now he's meeting a young man who, while a bastard, is still descended from Ned Stark. And Ned was the one who informed Stannis about his rightful claim to the throne, and so Stannis has a lot of respect for the memory of Ned, and so he has respect for Ned's family.
Stannis is a person who takes obligations very seriously, and he has a debt to Ned Stark, and Ned Stark died for Stannis's birthright. And I think he'll never forget that, and it definitely factors into his decision to take Jon seriously.
The letter that Davos found is the letter that Maester Aemon sent out from the Wall, calling on all of the 5 kings who were then fighting to send help to the Wall because the cold winds are rising, the White Walkers are moving, the Whites, the dead, are coming back to life. It's a pretty serious situation, and Stannis, indeed, when it comes in, it gets buried in a bunch of his other mail and doesn't get attended. But Davos, in the process of learning to read, comes across this thing, and Stannis has realized that he's going about this all wrong, that he's been trying to become king to save the realm when he should have been saving the realm to become king. And the last thing that Mance Rayder expects is a large force of mounted knights suddenly erupting from the woods onto his flanks as he's battering at the wall. He thinks all of the enemy is right in front of him. He doesn't think there's any foe left north of the wall, but Stannis has come north of the wall. And when, Stannis' force of disciplined mounted knights takes them unaware and suddenly is rolling through their camps, the army shatters.
Nobody knows why the Targaryens first came to the island of Dragonstone. Old Valyria was then at the height of its power and the center of the civilized world, which ended at the Narrow Sea. Westeros was a filthy backwater with 7 kings squabbling over borders and minor glories. So much for progress. The island itself was and is nothing. It had no gold or gems to lure Valyrian nobility. All it has is rock, mostly a shiny black stone too brittle for war and too sharp for building. The Targaryens called it dragon glass. I call it useless. But the Targaryens managed to raise a castle here. Simpletons claim they used ancient Valyrian sorcery, forgetting that the Targaryens brought a small army with them from Essos. There's no magic in strong backs, though admittedly the castle is unlike any in Westeros. Foreign and strange. If the Targaryens ever regretted their barren outpost and longed for the comforts of home, the doom made their folly permanent. Valyria collapsed into the waves and was no more. To look east was to see the ruin of their homeland, the greatest civilization before or since. But to look west, as Aegon realized, was to see a fertile land ripe for conquest. Perhaps even a new Valyria. Though good for little else, Dragonstone was the perfect staging point for Aegon's invasion of Westeros. The Blackwater Bay granted easy access to the continent. The lands there were disputed by 3 kingdoms, the Reach, the Iron Islands, and the Stormlands. But their capitals were far enough away that none could mount a force before Aegon got a foothold, even if their kings had been able to stop bickering over whose problem he was. Then it was too late. Aegon had chosen his first camp well, with the bay to the east, the river to the south, and open fields to the north and west. His army would be impossible to take by surprise. A perfect site for an invasion, and one day, his capital city, King's Landing. The Doom had taught the Targaryens the prudence of refuge. After the conquest, Dragonstone became the seat of the crowned prince and heir to the Iron Throne. It would serve them well, and me ill, 300 years later, after my brother Robert Baratheon rebelled against the Iron Throne and the Lannisters slaughtered the Mad King Aerys and his royal family. Robert dispatched me to deal with the last surviving Targaryen children. But before I arrived, a loyal knight smuggled them across the narrow sea to safety. Hatred for the Targaryens blinded Robert. Unjustly, I was blamed and stripped of our family's castle of Storm's End and given Dragonstone in its stead. Over the years, whenever I demanded my rights restored, Robert would remind me of the island's royal pedigree and pretend he was doing me honor, as if I were one of his tavern girls to be so easily deceived and dismissed. But Robert is dead, and I, Stannis Baratheon, am the rightful king of Westeros. Let the usurpers and traitors sit on the Iron Throne. From Dragonstone, I will be the dagger at their throat. If a man knows what he is and remains true to himself, he must fulfill his destiny and become who he is meant to be, however much he may hate it.
Is there any way I can help?
Yes, there is.
Once Stannis makes a decision, he never changes his mind. I mean, that's his strength in some ways. That's why he's been a very effective military commander. And it's also his weakness in that there's a rigidity to him, and he's incredibly stubborn. He's really defined by his will. So he's stuck. He's in an incredibly bad position right now. The only way is forward. And Melisandre presents him with an opportunity. He's seen her powers before. She promises him there's one chance left, and that's if we burn Shireen, and that will allow the Lord of Light to set you free on your path to Winterfell.
It's a scene that asks the question, well, what if you're wrong? What if you are completely certain that you know what the divine will is and that you're going to do this terrible thing because it's what the higher authority wants you to do? And what happens if you're not right?
It's obviously the hardest choice he's had in his life, and what it comes down to is just ambition versus familial love. And for Stannis, sadly, that choice is ambition. When George first told us about this, it was one of those moments where I remember looking at Dan, and it was just like, oh, it's so horrible, and it's so good in a story sense because it all comes together. You know, from the beginning, from the very first time we saw Stannis and Melisandre They were sacrificing people. They were burning people alive on the beaches of Dragonstone. And it's really all come to this. There's been so much talk about King's blood and the power of King's blood, and it all leads ultimately, fatally, to Shireen's sacrifice. And it's one of the most horrible moments we've shot, just in terms of the emotion of it.
Lord of Light, show us the way!
Mother, please!
Selyse is one of the most difficult people to get inside the head of, because she believes in a way that I could never believe in anything and would never want to believe in anything if I could. And it's turned her into a pretty terrible person. Meanwhile, the casualty of all of this has been her daughter, who has not had a mother in any meaningful sense of the word.
When it comes down to it, as much as she has convinced herself she believes in all of this, as much as she has acted the fanatic in the past, when your own daughter is screaming for you in agony, it overwhelms her religious convictions, and in that moment she finally becomes a mother again and wants to help her daughter, but it's far too late.
Send out a foraging party immediately. Siege begins at sunrise.
It's not going to be a siege, Your Grace.
There's just so much happening in this finale. This was one we entered into with a bit of trepidation because there's so many major events, and also a lot of excitement because there were scenes we've been anticipating for so long.
Stannis did the worst thing a person can possibly do in the world. And when he realizes that it was all for nothing, I think he's probably ready to be done at this point. I think in a way, Brienne showing up to kill him was almost like a welcome relief.
I was Kingsguard to Renly Baratheon. You murdered him with blood magic?
I did.
She's known in her heart of hearts that it was Stannis, that she saw Stannis' face on the shadow, but no one else believed her. And a lot of people thought she was complicit in the murder of Renly Baratheon, so this is a great weight off her shoulder to finally corner him. I think in the final moment, though, it's not relief because she was expecting this monster, and what she finds is Stannis, who has certain monstrous qualities. I mean, he's a man who's willing to sacrifice his own daughter, but he's also has certain very human qualities, and one of them is bravery. He's not going to go out whimpering.
Do you have any last words?
Go and do your duty.
He's telling Brienne, do your job. Like, I get it. You've got every right to do what you're about to do. He probably has a number of regrets, but he's not going to share them with this stranger. And don't expect me to beg for mercy or to open up my soul to you or anything, because that's not going to happen. It's over. I get it. Get on with it.